Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Hello there. Welcome in. Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni with Matthew Betz, and it's time to get divisional. Let's get divisional. Betz, what's up, man?
Yes, the divisional round. I'm so excited, dude. These games on paper profile as just awesome spots. I mean, at this point, obviously, we're not talking about any bad teams anymore. This is real. I think the NFL saw what happened with the 7 seeds last week. That was some rough football to watch. Shout out to my Eagles for being terrible, among other teams as well. So I don't think we'll have as many blowouts this week. Hopefully none. And I'm really just excited for the football to watch these games. So it should be a great weekend.
Yes, it's a good time to watch actual real NFL football. And then I know for DFS, there's so many different routes that you can go, especially on a 4-game slate. And the pricing, you and I will talk about that, but it's really easy to fit in so many different studs. You and I were looking at some of the optimals that we ran earlier, and you could basically fit in all the KC studs. You could fit in all the stud running backs and still have enough room to fit in another stud receiver like AJ Brown or someone else. So the pricing is probably a bit soft. So when we talk about some of these plays this week, I just want to give you room. You could really do anything. You could convince yourself, for me, that all 8 of these teams could win.
Yeah, I think that's a really viable take. I mean, looking at the spreads, too, from a Vegas perspective, they're all pretty tight, less than a touchdown in every game. So, yeah, I mean, this weekend, could go a lot of different directions, and I think that provides a lot of opportunity. If you have a take that's contrarian against what the field projects or what a lot of people are thinking is going to happen, I mean, in tournaments, feel free to take your shot.
Before we hop into the divisional slate, let's quickly talk about wild card. I know people want to hear about you and I and the utter destruction that we felt, because the wild card round, there's a couple assumptions for me that I was just dead wrong on. And I just want to start off by saying, I thought the Patriots would make that a game. I thought that game would hit the under. I thought that the Bills' passing attack probably wasn't what you wanted to invest in. I was dead wrong on that one. So I think for me, Damian Harris let me down a ton. I thought he was a good play and buried some lineups. And just overall, I was pretty low on the Bills.
Yeah, I was fortunate to play one Josh Allen team, thank goodness, but not enough of him. And to be truthful, I was kind of in the same boat as you. I thought that game would stay pretty close, talking about division rivals that know each other very well, thought it could be a pretty close game. So I was pretty in on Damian Harris, and that was just a train wreck. The other issue was the Darrell Williams situation, which, that being one of the Sunday games, if you played the 6-game slate, was tough because we were still waiting on information. All along, I think the sentiment was he's going to play, but maybe that toe issue is more serious than we were being kind of understanding of, or he also fumbled and then got benched after that. So that just went south incredibly quick. And I think that's a good learning situation, especially if the player coming off an injury, if the field just assumes this guy is 100% good to go. I mean, sometimes you're going to be wrong if you take the opposite approach. But when you're right, the payoff is massive. So if you avoided the Darrell Williams landmine last week, you probably had a solid week. I played a ton of them, unfortunately, but here we are. And what I love about DFS in the divisional round is we're going to talk about Jerick McKinnon versus Derrick Henry as a play this week. So it's a lot of fun for DFS slates. For sure. And just in general with wild card, there were so many different plays that you could. So if you didn't have that one, if you didn't have Byron Pringle in a GPP, you probably didn't get there. You didn't have Jamar Chase, who I was pretty light on. Then it got pretty bad. But, there's a couple of different plays that I felt good about. CJ Uzomah early on was one of our dart throws that we talked about. It's just, can you compete with the rest of these guys? Normally when we're talking about a slate that's, has 12, 13 games in regular season, you get a touchdown from CJ Uzomah, you feel great. But what you missed out on, and if you played somebody like that, was a 2-touchdown game from Dawson Knox or a 2-touchdown game from Travis Kelce. So when we talk about tight ends this week, we still have a ton of studs. And if you try to get too cute, you're going to end up with the Tyler Higbee game, who also had 2 touchdowns,
like where Tyler Higbee scores once, but you can't really compete against Gronk or Kelsey, who just have these massive scores. So just realize that there's not that many plays anymore. Next week, we'll only have 4 games to talk about, and the week after that too. So just kind of think about it in terms of correlation. And the last thing I'll mention, if you're playing in GPPs, you need leverage. And you don't get leverage if you're playing a bunch of different plays from a bunch of different games. Like last week, let's say you had Josh Allen and you had Dawson Knox. That's awesome. Like you had a really great call. But if you didn't follow that up with a bunch of other plays, you ended up spreading yourself so thin that everybody else would have had those 2 players and you didn't get over them. So go all in on a game. We're going to be talking about these 4. And maybe there is a game that you could say, hey, I really like 3 or 4 players from this game and I just want to go all in there. You can get way more leverage than saying, I have Cooper Kupp. Where it's like, well, this person has Stafford, they have Kupp, they have Fournette, and they have, I don't know, your boy Brashad Perryman who goes for a touchdown. Like those are the kind of things that you need. Anything else you want to say just about leverage in these kind of slates?
Yeah, I feel like a broken record. I think I talk about this almost every week now, and especially on these slates. Like, I love that DraftKings made it the 4-game main slate instead of like the 2 main slates on Saturday and Sunday, and then the Monday night game. So there's none of that nonsense this week. It's just the 4-game slate that I'm really excited to talk about. And the reason, again, is because of late swap advantage. Not enough of our opponents are doing it. And when you just have information at your disposal, how did the players do in the first round? Let's say that you didn't play Joe Burrow and he was popular and he went off with Jamar Chase and you didn't have those guys. Like, you can't play Cooper Kupp on Sunday. You got to get different elsewhere in your lineup. So using late swap to your advantage, I think, is huge. Again, not enough of the field is doing it. I absolutely want to prioritize that this weekend.
Well, we are glad that you are with us, continuing this playoff DFS train as it keeps rolling. If you want to get all of our picks, you can get them in the DFS Pass at dfspass.com. Use the promo code DFSPod. We had someone this past week. They finally signed up. They heard us say it long enough. And then they DM'd me and said, hey, by the way, this paid for itself in one weekend. I had fun playing DFS with you guys. At one point, Betz, did you know that I was in 3rd place in your contest? I think it was called the Wild Card Special. Wild Card
Something
Weekend.
like that. Yeah, I did. I saw that. And if you saw me, I was
matter.
very far towards the bottom in that one. So yeah, come play with us. It's so much fun. And there's nothing better than logging in, seeing your scores after the first game, and then seeing them the next day at the bottom. It's a fun tradition each week for me. I love it.
Heading into the Kansas City-Pittsburgh game, I was 3rd place in that contest. I was like, all right. And then I knew I have no shot at this because all I had left was Darrell Williams, and I didn't have anyone in the Rams-Cardinals game. So, if you want to play with us, you can go to ballersdfs.com. We'll talk more about that at the end of the episode, but let's talk about these 4 games.
Stack Attack.
So we're going to talk about the 4 games in the divisional round from a stacking perspective and maybe kind of speculate what we think the field is doing. We'll have a roster percentage report out on Friday and updated again on Saturday. But the first game we're going to talk about is the Cincinnati Bengals, the 4 seed at the Tennessee Titans, somehow the 1 seed. Titans are 3.5-point home favorites, and this game has a 47-point total. Before we get into the DFS talk, just in general, do you feel like the public is like behind the Bengals? Like they just want the Bengals to come through?
Yeah, they've kind of quietly turned into like the sexy team in the playoffs that everyone's sleeper. And for good reason. Like Joe Burrow's playing awesome. They're a fun team to root for. They've got a ton of great players. And I feel like the sentiment is like, this Titans team, how are they the 1 seed? Like they lost to the Jets this year. How are they the 1 seed? And I think if that's the way the market is perceiving this situation, I think a lot of people are going to be on the Bengals as like the team to go after in this one. I'm pretty excited about the Titans, though, to take a little bit of a contrarian approach. I mean, they're playing at home, obviously. They have the rest. And this is the healthiest they've been all season, talking about the offensive side of the ball with, Derrick Henry back after a foot of snow in Vermont. We have Julio Jones another week to rest and get healthy. A.J. Brown. They've played barely any snaps, all 3 of those guys together with Tannehill this year. So this is the Titans team that I think we were all really excited about in the preseason for their offense. And I think we'll see it hopefully this weekend against the Bengals.
Yeah, with the snow model humming, is this one of those situations where you trust the model and you just say, hey, we haven't had it started up in a while. It's kind of rusty. Or is this one of those situations where you use a little bit of like sensibility and say, hey, the model's not 100% right. It's like 99.9%. How many carries is Derrick Henry going to get?
Yes, this pains me to say because I just want to say, and for listeners that are like, what the heck are you guys talking about? Last year, there was an inside joke on the show. Every time it snowed up here in Vermont during the football season, Derrick Henry went bananas, and it was like literally every single week. Well, we got a foot of snow this week in Vermont, projected for more this weekend. So it feels scary to fade the model. But listen, man, here's the reality. Coming off the foot fracture, I don't think he's 100%. And this situation is not one that you just kind of plug and play a player and say, okay, go, you're fine. The fracture that he's dealt with is one that you need a slow ramp up period for. So obviously he's been doing a ton in practice and he's kind of ramping up each week. Based off what I've seen in practice, he looks way better than he did last week. So that's great. But is he going to come out and give you 25 carries in his first game in the last 12 weeks? I would be shocked if that's the case. So FanDuel, they were not sleeping on Derrick Henry. He is up at 9K. They are not giving you a discount on DraftKings. I'm a little interested. He's 7,500 over there, and it's like, okay, he's expensive, yes, but when you think about, we were playing Derrick Henry at like 10K and trying to jam him in at that price. So it feels like that's already baked in a little on DraftKings. On FanDuel, maybe not as much. But if the field is going to be on Derrick Henry, it feels like a pretty obvious fade situation with the injury stuff baked in.
What's also difficult is I feel like this game has the two premier running backs in terms of just talent in general, Mixon and Henry. And when we're stacking games, we usually pick a side and then either run it back with a wide receiver or the running back if we think that team's going to get a lead. It's hard with the Bengals because they've kind of transformed themselves into being a super slow team that had a really low neutral pass rate to now like 6th or 7th highest in the last couple of weeks. So it's not just as easy to say if you're playing Henry, then you're playing Burrow stacks, or if you're, playing Tannehill stacks, you're playing Mixon. Like it's not so simple for me. So I've gone back and forth what to do with Henry. You know that you can get buried, and based on what you said, you actually used the phrase snow projections, which is great.
Oh man.
You can get buried. So I think my stance is just to be underweight right now. In GPPs, because on FanDuel, that price is so high and there's enough wide receivers where I feel like I can make up the difference in other great games, right? All 4 of these games are great that you can stack them up. So I'm okay being lower on Henry this week.
I think so too. And don't hear we're not saying like Henry being there is really good for the Titans offense. Looking at the splits since he has become the bell cow of the team, and it actually all coincides with when Ryan Tannehill was the starter, when they drafted A.J. Brown since 2019. Like, they're averaging as a team almost a touchdown more per game. Their game total is at about 40 points when he's not in the lineup, 48.1 when he is in the lineup. So he helps the offense. And I think my stance here is like, okay, I want to have maybe a little exposure to Henry in the event that he's just an outlier and he comes off this foot fracture for 20 carries and 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't want to miss out on that. But my largest stance, I'm pretty excited about Ryan Tannehill stacks this week. And it's because we know he can run the football, A. B, like his splits with A.J. Brown and Julio in the lineup together, albeit a small sample size this year, are insane. His efficiency goes way up. We know Ryan Tannehill games historically hit the over. And if we like Cincy to start to throw more, which they have in the last month of the season with Joe Burrow, then I could see a back and forth shootout type of affair here. I like the over in this game, so I'm pretty excited about Ryan Tannehill. What are your thoughts there on the passing side for Tennessee?
Yes, I'm in on Tannehill. It was rough if you tried to play him during the regular season redraft, and then in DFS, if you tried to pick your spot and you said, oh, Henry's gone, they're going to rely on Tannehill. It just didn't happen. Week 18, they exploded against the Texans, but you saw that in Tannehill. He had the second most quarterback rushing touchdowns in the league. So like you mentioned, that kind of upside that says, hey, he gets 3 touchdowns, one of them on the ground. I want to use Tannehill stacks this week. I think that's kind of my stance. You can throw in Derrick Henry. They've always been pretty positively correlated in the past. But A.J. Brown is an elite play on DraftKings at 6,200. I mean, just play A.J. Brown. Like, Cincinnati allowed the 3rd most 20-plus yard completions. So Tannehill and Brown sound simple, but I kind of want to add another piece. And I want you to talk me down about Julio Jones, because I want to. I want to be there. Everyone says he's dead. they've buried him in pricing, right? 4,700 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. I mean, you could name this guy completely something else and no one would bat an eye, but it's Julio Jones. And in week 18, he saw 48% of the team's air yards. Okay. So talk me out of it.
I guess the downside here for the Tannehill stuff that we're excited about is that we know it's an efficiency-based play, right? Like Ryan Tannehill is not going to drop back and pass 45 times the way Josh Allen or Pat Mahomes could any given week. That's just not in his bag. So you're relying on efficiency from Tannehill, and you're relying on big plays from his wide receivers, which is why we're so excited about A.J. Brown. Can Julio get there on a like 5 for 50 and 1 type of game? Absolutely, of course. And it depends on the slate you're playing. If you're playing the 4-game slate, it may not be enough, is what I'm saying. On a 2-game slate, by all means, yes, it can get there. I don't know if I'm going to click the button on Julio this week. The price is pretty far down there. I just am seeing in my head, like, I don't see a range of outcomes where Julio can actually break the slate for you the way other wide receivers can on this 4-gamer. So that's where I'm at with Julio. Are you gonna play some stacks with Julio?
I mean, of course,
you're a Falcons fan, so your allegiance is there.
I definitely will. I'll just say this: if you're playing cash this week, he's cheap enough to stick in a lineup if you really wanted to like pay up somewhere else. So, yeah, I think he's fine. I would agree with you though. The ceiling of expecting 102 is not there. It's just not. Let's say you got 6 for 80 and a touchdown at 4,700. I would be super excited to get something like that. So that's kind of what you're hoping for is the yardage, which Julio's always done in the past. And then last thing I want to say, you're going to see in your matchups when you log into FanDuel or log into DraftKings, and you're going to see that the Bengals are the worst against fantasy tight ends. And then you're going to see there's guys named Anthony Ferkser and Jeff Swaim. They just can't compete. So I'm out on the Ferk Daddy.
Yeah. Remember, I was kind of in on him for best ball, and that was a train wreck this year. So, yeah, no, not playing the Ferk Daddy, not playing Jeff Swaim. So I'm excited to watch them in this game go off for 2 touchdowns probably because that's how this works. So, but yeah, I'm not going to play him.
The Ferk Daddy, he was like a summer fling. Like, you went on a couple dates and you moved on. You saw a movie together, and you'll always remember that when you saw that movie in the summer, you'll always think back to the Ferk Daddy. But yeah, it's over, bro. We're not going there. He did go to Harvard. Let's talk about the Bengals side. So Joe Burrow, you mentioned, is the name that people want to play. They want to play Burrow double stacks. Jamar Chase, obviously, is amazing. What do we do with T. Higgins? Because he keeps showing up in our projections as a strong play, and he was super quiet for most of that game last week.
Yeah, I barely did anything from a target standpoint. Obviously, the box score reflects that from his production. It was minimal, obviously. So he's kind of boom bust. I mean, we've seen him have like 3 top 5 wide receiver 1 weeks in season-long leagues throughout the year, but we know that his downside is certainly there. Just once has he hit double-digit fantasy points in the last month. So it's a boom-bust GPP only option for me this week. If you're playing a Burrow stack and want to get some leverage on Jamar Chase, I think it's viable. That said, it's getting more and more terrifying to fade Chase, which I did last week, and it was not good. It was not good, people, to fade Jamar Chase, because we think of him as only this downfield threat. That's what we thought about him throughout the course of the year. He'd give you those long bombs and nothing else. Well, over the last month, he's seen double-digit targets in 3 of the last 4 weeks, and his role is changing. They're getting him involved on jet sweeps, short area targets, becoming the focal point of the offense, which is smart. He's an awesome player to get the ball in his hands. So you're seeing the role change, I think, for Jamar Chase, and I think it's negatively affecting T. Higgins' outlook. So if you're playing Burrow stacks, mix him in for sure, but I'm not over the moon about T. Higgins. I certainly fell into that trap last week.
Yeah, I feel like he's more of those that you're guessing it's not going to be a chase week, and you go in on Higgins, which is where I was last week. You and I did play a lot of Tyler Boyd, and I think he's a solid play this week. Tennessee's allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing slot wide receivers. So on DraftKings, I think you can play Tyler Boyd in cash at 4,800. He's a solid play, but is your stance to basically take Burrow and figure out who the 2 pieces are if you're going to stack him?
Yeah, I think so. Tennessee, we know, is a team that's sort of this like mini pass funnel. Like they're not like the most obvious, like the Bucks. We can't run on the Bucks. You got to pass on the Bucks. Everyone knows that. Tennessee is not far behind. I mean, opposing wide receivers are being targeted at the highest rate in the league against Tennessee. So I think someone pops up for a massive game this week, whether it's Chase, Higgins, or Boyd. I think we would say most weeks that's going to be Chase, but certainly you can take some shots. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about those Cincy pass catchers. And then obviously because of that, I think you have to be excited about what Joe Burrow can do, especially if we think that Ryan Tannehill can have success. And this kind of turns into those big play back and forth type of situations. So yeah, I like both sides of this ball as far as the passing attack. I guess in that stance, then I would be kind of out on Joe Mixon. I mean, the matchup is pretty tough against Tennessee. The Titans averaging 3.9 yards per carry allowed. That's fourth best in the league on the year. And Joe Mixon's been extremely inefficient, 3.3 yards per carry over the last 6 weeks. So are you with me in kind of the fade on Joe Mixon? Do you think you want to play him because no one else will? What's your take on that situation?
Yeah, when I was looking at this game, he's the piece that seems like the field will be the lowest on, because on DraftKings, he's the RB3. FanDuel, he's the RB2. It's really easy to just scroll past his name. And also, if you're playing Henry, I feel like a lot of people aren't going to be playing Mixon in the same game. So Mixon's nothing more than a leverage piece on Henry. And I don't mind it if you said Burrow, let's say Mixon gets one on the ground and one through the air, just somehow like he falls in the end zone, then I think you're getting him at a massively low roster percentage and you're adding another wide receiver. So that's the only chance I'm doing it, is if I really think the Bengals are going to put up 30 points and he gets 2 touchdowns. But it's kind of easy to move past him because there's a lot more value at the running back position as you scroll down. We'll talk about Leonard Fournette in a little bit. He seems like a really solid play. So I just think he's going to be a piece that I'm definitely lower on. But give me your Vegas pick.
I'm going to go with the Titans. I think the market has overreacted. Everyone says that the worst 1 seed we've seen in forever, but they're still a really good team. I'll lay the 3.5.
I will go with the over. It's at 47 right now, and I really could see this game go either way. I have strong convictions in the other 3, but I mean, I'm still not convinced Tennessee should have been a 1 seed. So I don't know. It's just really hard for me. I know that's probably more narrative based, but like, honestly, this is the game I could see go either way.
Yep, for sure.
All right, next one is the San Francisco 49ers at the Green Bay Packers. Packers are 6-point home favorites at Lambeau, and this game is a 47 total. This feels like a game that we grew up with like in the 90s, like a Brett Favre, Steve Young. Like, this is cool. This is a classic matchup, and the 49ers are trending as one of those teams as well, at least for the NFC, that people are like, they're cool, they're fun, they're all over social media this week. I mean, I saw a ton of videos of Debo dancing, of their offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel. Like, they're a team that people want to talk about, but there's a lot to like on the Packers side, especially who they're getting back. So talk to me about how you see this game.
Yeah, this is a tough one from a game stack for me, and it's because I see the Packers taking care of business here. Lined open at 4.5 as favorites. It's all the way up to 6. Could see that easily getting to 6.5 or 7 by the time the weekend gets here. You're talking about a team that is trending in the right direction as far as health. On the defensive side, likely, we don't have confirmation yet, but likely getting back Jair Alexander. We haven't seen him since like September. And Zadarius Smith back as well. So if those two are back, they're also getting their left tackle, David Bakhtiari. He came back in week 18, played a limited role. He's back as a full go. And then, of course, you have, oh, by the way, MVP candidate likely to win it, Aaron Rodgers playing at home with extra rest and time to prepare for this game. So I like this spot for Green Bay. I know that San Francisco is kind of the sexy team as far as the NFC. Like, they're super fun to root for. Debo just keeps breaking every single efficiency metric that exists, so you want to keep playing him. But I really could see this game turning into more of a lopsided affair than any of the other ones, and I think the biggest line, shows that as well.
From a pace perspective, this game projects as by far the slowest of the week. Like Green Bay was dead last in neutral pace. San Francisco is 4th slowest. I will say there's some flaws to talking about this as, it's just going to be slow, only because San Francisco ranks 1st in yards per play. And you mentioned it, Debo breaks the metrics. Jimmy G was 2nd in yards per attempt. And then on the Green Bay side, yes, they might be slow, but they also have Aaron Rodgers. So it's just really hard to look at these two teams and just say, well, they're just going to run the ball. And it's like they can break big plays. We know that Rodgers can hit Davante Adams wherever, and Davante Adams has killed the 49ers. We mentioned this, you and I, like all over our articles, but just like destroyed them stat lines wise, like to the point where he would break this slate if he continued to do that. So is Adams one of those like lock him in, I have to play him if I'm playing cash?
I think so. I mean, the conversation is, looking at the pricing on DK, he's 8,500, on FanDuel 8,700. It's a no-brainer. If you're talking about, do I play Derrick Henry on FanDuel or Davante Adams for 300 less? 10 out of 10 times for me, if you're playing cash over there, it's Davante Adams. And then the other conversation is, how does he compare to Cooper Kupp at the top of the pricing range on FanDuel? Again, 9,500 for Kupp, way cheaper than Kupp Davante Adams is, so that's a no-brainer. And then on DK, I think it's more of a conversation. 8,600 for Kupp, 85 for Davante. But you're talking about a player that we know, especially in these types of games in the playoffs, where Aaron Rodgers is going to go to his guy over and over again. The San Francisco secondary is the weakness of this defense. Davante Adams, I think, is going to smash this week. My early lean is to lock him in cash if you're playing that type of format this weekend.
Yeah, the running games are what interests me the most from a GPP perspective, because stacking Rodgers and Adams, and then maybe adding another piece like Allen Lazard, MVS, like that's the way you could go in GPPs. Seems really straightforward. But the running games for both of these teams are intriguing. Like, of the playoff teams, the Packers are allowing the most expected points per rush attempt. So, Elijah Mitchell's probably going to see 15 plus touches. I mean, that Debo's basically a running back and still leading the team in routes run. So that's the running game that I like on San Francisco's side. I don't really want anything to do with Jimmy G. And then on the Packers side, Aaron Jones, I feel like, is going to be forgotten this week and just kind of buried. Like, he's priced up on the sites where you can't just like get too sneaky. Like on DraftKings, he's the RB2. On FanDuel, is the RB3. Like you have to pay up, but I think you're paying up for someone that's going to be contrarian, and you're betting on his efficiency because as a pass catcher, he can get it done. So what are your thoughts on the two running games?
Yeah, I think it is pretty interesting this week for Aaron Jones. And, looking at like what happened in week 18, obviously he was inactive. AJ Dillon played. And throughout the middle part of the season, there was kind of this like back and forth, like, oh, maybe Dillon's taking over, maybe it's Aaron Jones. They're kind of splitting work. And then AJ Dillon was playing like late into the third quarter with Jordan Love in a meaningless game. So I'm not sure if maybe they rested Aaron Jones. He had the minor knee issue to like get him ready for the playoffs. And looking at the running backs on this slate, talking about like who can just win on efficiency and somehow find his way into 3 touchdowns. Obviously, the likelihood of that happening is low for any running back. But if there's one that can do it, Aaron Jones is massive leverage off of chalky Davante Adams. I think that's pretty interesting in GPPs. So yeah, and especially if Fred Warner does sit in this game, he has the ankle issue. It sounds like he'll probably play, but if he does sit, that would obviously upgrade the running backs on Green Bay as well. So I'm pretty interested in Aaron Jones in GPPs this week.
Yeah, I think just in general, you mentioned it off the top, but like things are trending well health-wise for the Packers. The 49ers is the opposite. Nick Bosa was also in concussion protocol. So it's like both of those situations are just trending towards this is going to be a Packer win. These two teams did play in week 3 at San Francisco, and Green Bay won 30-28. So there's a lot to like on the Packers side. So is there any reason that we should go in other directions other than maybe Debo and Eli Mitchell for the 49ers? Like George Kittle is always great for GPPs. Like if you want to go there, he's all the way down at 5,300 on DraftKings. So that interests me, but the target volume just hasn't been there.
Yeah, it's been so tough for Kittle. Because it's the same conversation every week. We know what he's capable of. We know what the floor is, and we've seen the floor for a month straight. So I don't think anyone's going to play George Kittle. I think he's interesting in large field GPPs because of the fact that the only person playing him is Kyle Borganoni. But the metrics have been pretty tough. I mean, looking at like targets per route run is a stat that I know the guys have talked about on the main show for a lot of part of the season. He's just not seeing targets despite the fact that he's running routes out there. Like Kittle's just out there doing cardio for the most part at this point because Debo is just having so many efficient big plays. So I personally would not play Debo and Kittle together. I don't think they can both get there the way that they win. So large field GPPs, sure, sprinkle them in, but I think if you're looking at, the quote optimal plays from San Francisco, it's going to be Eli Mitchell and it's going to be Debo Samuel.
All right, so give me your Vegas pick in this game.
This feels like such a square bet, but I'll take the Packers -6. I don't see how they lose this game.
I already did take the Packers -6. It feels like they're just set up at home against, Jimmy G, nice story. I get that they're behind him, but it's not trending well.
We didn't even mention either with Jimmy G real quick. Also the shoulder issue, not just the thumb issue now. So it takes a little bit off the top of the ceiling, I think, for the pass catchers as well.
Yeah, you're just not going to get those games where he throws 3 or 4 touchdowns. Like, he can't compete even at his cheap price. $5,200 on DraftKings sounds great, but you're not going to get that. He did have as many 300-yard games as Patrick Mahomes this year. Hot stat.
Ooh, that is a hot stat. Where can we find that hot stat? Is it on the website?
Oh, yeah. 25 quarterback statistics from the 2021 fantasy season from yours truly. It's one of my favorite articles to write every single year. All right, 2 more games. This one I'm pretty stoked to talk about. I feel pretty strong in my convictions. It's the Los Angeles Rams at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers are 2.5-point home favorites. This game is a 48.5-point total. It's a rematch from week 3 when these two teams played, and the Rams won. Stafford went for 343 and 4. I don't know if you remember, that was a D-Jax game where he had a huge bomb, and Brady, in a comeback mode, had 58 attempts. So are you seeing, I really like the Rams in this game. I think that they can compete, and it's hard for me seeing somebody outside of Mike Evans in the wide receiver corps be a difference maker. And so that actually matters a lot to me when I think of just how these two teams match up.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think talking about the Bucs side of things, it was really intriguing, I think, and awesome to see Mike Evans get into an alpha role. We've seen it obviously in his career, but with Godwin and AB there, it was kind of rotating. 1 week it's Godwin, 1 week it's AB, 1 week it's Mike Evans. Oh, and then there's Gronk. Last week, he was the dude, seeing a 28% target share. Carved up my Eagles, unfortunately. But if you're playing someone on that side, he's priced up a little bit. I like Mike Evans in GPPs. The ceiling is definitely there if he continues that role of kind of that alpha wide receiver 1 on this team. When you look at who he's competing with for targets, Brashad Perryman, your boy Tyler Johnson, who Brady was very not happy with last week in his play, he's in Tom's doghouse now, and Scotty Miller. Like, that's the competition outside of Gronk. So yes, I like Mike Evans. He's the most obvious play. And I think too, like, if you hear any narratives out there of like, okay, you got to fade Mike Evans because you got Jalen Ramsey on the other side. No, don't worry about that. Not an issue. Jalen Ramsey has not been shadowing much at all this year. So I think Mike Evans is solid. I'm pretty excited about him in this game.
Yeah, on DraftKings is $6,800. That's way too cheap. On FanDuel, he is priced up. Like, he's more expensive than Jamar Chase. So I like him from a volume perspective. But on the Tampa Bay side, like, I think my favorite plays are probably Fournette or Gronk.
Not Evans. So you're more of a Gronk week this week, huh?
I think so. Fournette, if he's healthy, if he's playing at 5,700, I think he's one of the strongest cash game plays that you can get. But also, like, there's real upside for him to get 2 touchdowns, to catch 4 or 5 balls, and be a difference maker at the running back position. So I think that's more of what I'm trying to say. There's lots of wide receivers I like this week, but I think Fournette at running back can be someone that you almost have to have in your lineup.
Yeah, he's too cheap for the role that he's had. We talked about him assuming he would play last week. And then I was shocked he didn't play. So I think he is back out there. For the record, we are recording this on Thursday, so we don't have final word. But he did tweet in all caps on Wednesday that he is back. And I don't think you tweet in all caps unless you're 100% sure you're coming back. So we'll see on Lenny. Any concern with Gio? I know that like Lenny really phased Gio out, but Gio looked pretty good last week, honestly. Do you think he takes any passing down work? Because that, to me, would be a pretty big factor as far as GPP ceiling for Lenny. You can't really run on the Rams. We talk about it the Bucs all the time. The Rams' run defense is awesome. So I think this is a Brady passing game. I like the pass catching opportunity for the running back position in general. Do you think Gio carved out a role at all last week?
I think so. At 5K, it's definitely interesting, but how many carries you're going to get? 2, 3.
Oh,
he's not going to get any
I'm
goal
not
line
playing
work.
Gio. I'm just saying for Lenny, like for his role, his upside.
Yeah. He's definitely going to eat into it. But at 5,700, I'm still going to play this as if I'm playing it as if I'm right, which is, dangerous, but that's how we play DFS. I'm playing this game as if Leonard Fournette is getting at least 1 touchdown, catching at least 4 balls. And at 5,700, he's 3xing, 4xing on his price, which I'm not asking him to get me 30 points. I'm asking him to get, 18 to 20. And I think that's in the realm of possibility with Gio still seeing some work. But it kind of begs the question, like, do we think this game flow is going to go the same direction it did last time? Like, if you knew you were getting 58 pass attempts from Tom Brady, does that mean that Fournette feels like less of a good play?
I think so. I mean, I don't think we're going to project that, obviously, for Brady. Right. That would be insane. But if this game does hit the over and it is a back-and-forth passing attack, because look at how the offenses can interact, right? You can't run on the Bucs. You can't run on the Rams. Last time these two teams played, Tom Brady was the leading rusher in that game for the Bucs. That's where we're at right now. So, yeah, I think, not that I'm not in on Leonard Fournette, I can see paths to downside in this game. And that's why in GPPs, likely he's going to be more of a guy that I come in underweight on relative to the field.
It's interesting in this game because obviously the Bucs are favored. They're at home. They're the champs from this past year. But you look at the Rams side and you can say, like, wow, this is a more talented offense with so many more layers, especially the way that Matthew Stafford is just pummeling his wide receivers with targets. He's the scariest part of this game to me because the Matthew Stafford we've seen before, we saw in week 3 where he carved them up, 4 touchdowns. Like, there are weeks where he is scary and he throws 2 or 3 picks and you wonder, like, how many more years does he have left? So Matthew Stafford's kind of the key to me. He's cheap. Like DraftKings 6,200, it makes it really easy to double stack. Like, these are the 2 guys the entire year. When we were doing the analysis, it was kind of like copy and paste. Like, you play Stafford double stacks, you play Brady double stacks. And so with Stafford, you're obviously playing him with Kupp, but is there any other plays in this game that you would attach to him that you have some level of confidence in?
Yeah, I think you look at Odell Beckham and his role with this team. He is a red zone target for Matthew Stafford. And when you're talking about GPPs, which that's the only situation you would play Odell Beckham in, you're talking about touchdown upside to help get you there. And he's certainly the guy that he's been going to, not named Cooper Kupp, obviously. 6 of the 9 games with the Rams, he scored a touchdown. 5 of 6 of those touchdowns came inside 7 yards or less. So, like, when they get in close, Sean McVay is designing plays for Odell to get the ball in his hands. So I think he's probably a guy I'm pretty interested in. And then we saw last week, too, on Monday Night Football, like, designing plays specifically for him. The trick play with the pass did seem to be kind of a guy that was looking better just from the eye test at how he was playing football. And certainly, if you are stacking Stafford, I agree, you got to do a double stack. So obviously, Kupp's a no-brainer, awesome play. And then I'm pretty interested in Odell this week.
What's interesting also about the Rams, and I've said this before with McVay, is he can kind of morph as a play caller. So you know that the Rams throw the ball at a pretty high rate, but when they're leading, their rush rate goes above 50%. It's one of the top among remaining playoff teams. So Cam Akers is one of those plays. We talked about Joe Burrow, but the public wants Cam Akers to be a thing, and he's super talented, and he looked pretty good on Monday night in his touches. Like, okay, he's more electric than Sony Michel, even coming off his Achilles injury. So how are you handling this game? I feel like the easy way is to say Stafford stacks, but with Akers, are you mixing him in as part of a stack, or are you basically only using him as leverage against those?
Yeah, I think more of a leverage play. I know he had a couple of deep targets last week, dropped one, caught the other. So you could say, like, yeah, maybe he has one of those, but it's low probability. So I think the best way that Stafford gets there is not through Sony Michel or Cam Akers, and then vice versa. Cam Akers goes off in this game because they get out to a lead and they're able to run on the Bucs, which not many teams have. But that said, when you're looking at 4-game slates, like, matchups aren't everything. Usage means a lot, and leverage, as we said in GPPs, means a lot. So yeah, it's tough on Akers because I wish he was more expensive. I think he's going to be extremely popular. We just saw him on an island game. He looked great, like you said. In dynasty leagues, people love Cam Akers, so like people are going to want to play him in this spot. I think I might just let the field dictate how I handle it. If he's going to be popular, I'll probably come in underweight. If he's going to go overlooked, I'll probably play a few shares of K-Makers.
On FanDuel at 5,700, I can tell you right now, he's going to be a popular play, especially if he sees, the type of workload. He saw more than 50% of the snaps this past week. Yeah, I think that the long target is going to be what sticks in people's mind, because that's not always repeatable. Even though the Bucs in the past have given up a lot to running backs, but that's going to be the thing that's going to carry people over the top of. He looked good. He got a deep target. This is somebody who's cheap. Like, we're going to play him. So yeah, I think I'll probably be a little bit more underweight. But I did write him up as a GPP play on FanDuel. What about some of the ancillary guys? We can finish off with them. Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee. Jefferson's routes in terms of just like pure numbers have been going down for 3 straight weeks. That's kind of concerning to me, because he was the guy in the middle of the season that was the deep target guy. And we're like, okay, we're going to get 2 or 3 of those a game, but he's cheap. So you can add him in. Like, everybody's going to be playing Cup, and rightfully so. Is Van Jefferson the piece, or Tyler Higbee the piece that you add in? Because Odell Beckham's probably the optimal play, but how do you feel about those other 2?
Yeah, for me, it's tough on Van Jefferson. It's tough to click the button because you're relying on a deep target to hit. And could it happen on a small slate? Yeah, of course it could. But he's just been so boom bust. And like you said, if the routes are turning the wrong direction, he's not going to dominate targets for that to kind of compensate for it. If Cooper Kupp's going to take some, and Odell, and oh, by the way, Tyler Higbee's role is very, very quietly pretty awesome. I'm kind of excited about Tyler Higbee. I said that last week, and you said, not really that into him. And when you talk about, how he compares to like Gronk and Kelsey and those guys, like clearly it's a different conversation. But at his price point, $4K on DraftKings, $5,400 on FanDuel, like Tampa Bay has allowed the 5th most catches to opposing tight ends this year. He's been seeing a little bit more as far as volume. He has a 20+% target share in each of the last 5 games. No one's going to play him. I'm kind of interested, if you're playing Stafford, to pair him with Higbee this week.
Okay, so you're saying you'd rather play Higbee than Jefferson. It just kind of comes down to, does Jefferson catch a deep bomb, and does Higbee get in the end zone? That's kind of like what we're saying. We're kind of betting that Kupp's getting in the end zone, but we're kind of saying, where's these other 2 or 3 touchdowns coming from? So, I think the Rams are a team that I think can win this outright. I'm okay if you want to do money line, but right now my stance is Rams plus 2.5, and I would actually take the under.
Oh, interesting. I don't think people are going to be on the under, so that's an interesting take. I also think the Rams can pull this one out, which always sounds scary when you're backing Stafford with what we have seen in the last 6 weeks, the turnovers and that sort of thing. But if he plays well, they roll. And betting against Tom Brady is always scary, but I'm going to take the Rams plus 2.5.
All right, last game we're going to talk about is the big mama on Sunday night. It's the Buffalo Bills 3 seed at the Kansas City Chiefs 2 seed. This feels like it is the AFC title game, because it was last year. And I mean, we have a total of 54 points. It's been bet down from 55 earlier, but Kansas City's 2.5-point favorites at home in Arrowhead. But man, the Bills have been gaining a ton of steam this week, I feel like, in popularity and in terms of just what Josh Allen just did. So let's start with the Bills side, and then we'll talk about the Chiefs. With Josh Allen, we're getting not just some runs, we're getting design runs, we're getting like massive yardage. I mean, we're getting lines where we can say it's kind of easy to project him as the QB1. He's priced that way, but it's kind of easy to say this team runs completely through him. If they're going to hit their team implied total of about 26, Allen's responsible for at least 2 of those touchdowns and probably another. So in cash, would you say that Allen is just the easy quarterback, just pay up and move on?
I think so, especially because we talked about on the slate, like the pricing for a lot of the running backs are really solid. We'll talk about Devin Singletary in a minute. Cam Akers is cheap. Leonard Fournette is too cheap. You can fit Josh Allen if you want him on this slate. And if you're playing cash games, no brainer. He has the highest floor ceiling combination, in my opinion, this week. And it's because of the rushing, right? Like we talked about it last week when we talked about some prop bets. I love the over on his rushing line, and he smashed it. And he's been smashing it in the playoffs. Looking at his stat lines, like in the playoff games, it's insane. 92 yards, 54 yards. He only had 3 in one game. That was a couple years ago. Then 88 and last week, 66. over the last 6 weeks, he's run for over 400 yards himself. So that gives you access to an insanely safe floor. And then, of course, we know he can break the slate as we saw last Saturday. So, yes, if you're playing cash games, for me, it's Josh Allen this week.
Yeah, Josh Allen is kind of the way that you would. I mean, I want to believe in the Bills passing game. Like, that's where I want to go. In week 5, these two teams played, and the Bills won 38-20, and it was on the back of Josh Allen. The Chiefs are also allowing the highest pass success rate and the highest expected points per pass attempt among remaining playoff teams. So that's where I want to go. And also for the fact that Kansas City has just not been getting after the pass. I mean, after the quarterback. They have the lowest adjusted sack rate left. So those combinations basically say bet on the Bills passing game. And if you're doing that, I feel like you kind of have to sort out 4 or 5 guys. Dawson Knox had 2 touchdowns last week. He looks like a solid play. Like he's the tight end I would go to if you're not going Gronk, Kelsey. He's probably the next step in that conversation in terms of optimal plays. Stephon Diggs is the obvious play too. What do we do with the rest of these jabronis?
Steph Diggs and the jabronis. Yeah, dude, it's tough. I mean, usually like when you're talking about a double stack, it's kind of easy to pick based off the statistics, like who you should go with. We just talked about it. On the Rams, like Van Jefferson is not going to project well. It could happen, but doesn't project well. On the Bills guys, no one projects well, and it's because Josh Allen is playing awesome football, spreading the ball out to a bunch of different guys. Last week, it was Dawson Knox. Of course, we know Steph Diggs can get 12 targets in any game. It's in his bag. And then, like, Cole Beasley ran fewer routes last week than Isaiah McKenzie. And I think when you're looking at the offense, they just look better with Isaiah McKenzie on the field at this point in Cole Beasley's career. So maybe we're seeing, like, a changing of the guard situation there. So I don't see how you play Cole Beasley. And then Manuel Sanders, like, he was fun early in the year, but again, he hasn't done much. Gabe Davis ran more routes than him last week. So it kind of seems like they're doing like a full wide receiver committee at this point, and it's so tough to pick who it's going to be. But yeah, I think I'm out on Sanders and Cole Beasley, and I'll hope for maybe more efficiency from guys like Dawson Knox and Isaiah McKenzie and Gabe Davis are kind of the 3 that I'll sprinkle in GPPs. At
least, with Gabe Davis, his usage near the goal line is just a lot stronger than the others in terms of end zone targets. So he ran the most routes of those dudes. They're just dudes. So you really are having to guess of what you're doing. So with Allen, it's pretty clear you want to double stack with those if you think the offense is going to get 2 to 3 passing touchdowns. But Devin Singletary kind of is the one that kind of differentiates how you're using the Bills. We know his usage. Like, we know he's the guy. Like, for 2 or 3 weeks, we're like, all right, it's really, really good. Yeah, you should keep using him. Now it's at this point where we're like, okay, we forget. Who was their other guy, Zach Moss? Like, that's where we're at this point. So, with Devin Singletary, are you using him in Josh Allen stacks? Are you going Allen, Singletary, and then either Diggs or Knox?
I think you certainly could, and it's a way to get different in this spot. If you think, the Bills just come out and exceed their total, if you think they can win this game, I mean, it's got a 54-point total. If you think it hits the over, like, there's paths to Josh Allen and Devin Singletary getting there in the same game, as we saw last week. So it is possible for sure. The other thing that's kind of intriguing about Devin Singletary is not just his total volume and role, but last week he ran around on 80% of Josh Allen's dropbacks. That was the highest he's had this season. So it's like they're kind of turning him also into an extension of the passing game, which then again takes some excitement off of like Beasley and Sanders and those kind of guys, and it makes it really tricky. So I think it's somewhat straightforward on the Bills side. We love Josh Allen. We love Devin Singletary. And then I think you're hoping that you kind of pick the right pass catcher in those situations.
Yeah, so we like the Bills' passing attack. But on the other side, how do we feel about the Chiefs? I mean, I feel like the running backs, I tried to stare and decipher like which way to go with this. And obviously McKinnon, like, somehow just ruined the slate. If you played him in GPP, props to you. If you had the stones, I'm kind of just not trying to guess at all and just saying, hey, I'm going to figure out a way to go Mahomes, 2 guys, and figure it out from there.
Yeah, who would have, Jerick McKinnon, who would have thought this is the dude? Yeah, it's so tough, right? Because we're recording this on Thursday. Clyde Edwards-Helaire on Wednesday was a full practice participant, so it looks like he's likely back this week, barring a setback. Darrell Williams didn't practice Wednesday with the toe issue. Obviously, he was active last week. Did he flare it up? Was he just benched because of the fumble? Who knows? But if you're talking about how these teams want to play, it's obviously throwing the football. And I think based off of the way that CEH has played in the past game this year, he's likely to take a backseat to Jerick McKinnon in passing situations. I could still see CEH being the lead ball carrier, but when you're talking about GPP upside as stacking partners potentially with Mahomes, I don't want to play CEH and Mahomes together. So I think McKinnon, while it feels like you're chasing a little bit, maybe he has just earned the role and they use him out of the backfield like we've seen, Andy Reid just go to whoever has been the best running back in his backfield in the playoffs. Remember last year, Darrell Williams took over. He was the dude when it should have been CEH, or we thought it was going to be CEH. So Andy Reid is not afraid to go with who he thinks is the best for the game plan. I think it could be Jerick McKinnon, and it sounds terrifying to click the button on him, but it's really not a situation where I want to play CEH this week at all.
No, I agree with you. With Mahomes, you're basically saying he's going to get there, and he needs to be the quarterback one, because what you're saying is that Josh Allen isn't. Does that make sense? Like, if you're using the same game, that's what you're saying in a GPP. So, I mean, flip a coin. Either one of these dudes could do it. I would bet on Allen if I had to right now. But these are clearly the two strongest plays in terms of quarterback, in terms of ceiling outcomes. And these two teams played last year, AFC Championship game. The Chiefs won 38-24. I feel like Byron Pringle is just going to be like, we saw what he did last week. Let's keep going with it. And Tyreek Hill, when you see his salary at $6,600, it feels like I have to play him. But his usage just says that he's a good play, or at least like that's what he's been recently. So I want to play him in terms of if the field is going to go somewhere else, I'm going to play Tyreek Hill because he can easily be the wide receiver one on this slate. What's your stance on Hill this week?
Yeah, it's so tough because you said the price tag is insane. Like, when have we seen Tyreek Hill at $6,600 on DraftKings? Almost never, right? So it almost feels like a trap. But like looking at his game logs, he's only topped 5 targets twice in his last 7 games. So he's been a guy it feels like you're chasing. But at the same time, we know he can pop up for a random 10-target game any week. He has a 10 and 13-target game in his last 7. So it's kind of been boom bust. I think it probably takes him out of cash for me this week if you're playing in that sort of situation. But obviously, looking at game environment, they're at home. He's tied to Pat Mahomes. He's Tyreek Hill. We know he has it in his bag. So, yeah, I think if he's going to come in as a guy that's not as popular in tournaments, certainly he's viable. And I think also looking at the slate, like if you need a late swap, you can use, if you have these guys in your flex, like Tyreek 6,600, Travis Kelce 6,500, Steph Diggs 6,500. And then Devin Singletary, 5,900. So you can kind of figure out what the field is doing and then like pivot if you need to access Hill's ceiling if he is a contrarian piece.
No, I love that point, especially if you are flexing Kelce. Let's say that you chose a tight end, earlier on. You use somebody like Gronk. You used Kittle. You got really different. Whatever it is, you can use Hill to your advantage because I feel like the field as a whole won't want to do it. Kelce's weird. His price went down on DraftKings despite 2 touchdowns this past week. I don't understand that at all. But Kelce's obviously a super strong play. In my optimal that I was doing earlier, like Kelce was my flex. That's who I had in there to kind of like fit in a couple of different pieces. But I also had in Hill in that lineup too for a second for like GPP. I just said Mahomes, Hill, Kelce, and go from there. But any other thoughts on this game and how you'd stack it up?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess we didn't really talk about the other guys, just the dudes from the KC side. Like, I assume you're not interested in Mecole Hardman or Byron Pringle. Are you chasing that at all?
Mecole Hardman plays in the NFL?
Apparently. Only when Tyreek Hill is out.
That's when he does his thing. What's funny, side note, Mecole Hardman and Isaiah McKenzie, both University of Georgia guys who somehow are doing things in the NFL. Like Hardman got drafted too high, but no, I don't want anything to do with Hardman. With Pringle, I'll be underweight because I feel like the field is going to want to chase last week.
All right, fair enough. I think we said it all.
All right, give me your Vegas pick.
Let's go Bills. Bills plus the points.
I just took earlier in the day Bills money line, and it made me feel good about my life. So yeah, I'm alive.
Can't wait for Mahomes to come out and smash, and they're going to win by like 2 touchdowns now just because he said that.
Oh, for sure. All right, let's talk about some props we like.
Straight cash, homie.
So we shared these last week. Hopefully it was helpful to give you a picture. I didn't do so hot on some of mine. You and I were awesome on Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor made us some money, which is not a sentence that most people would be able to say. And then I got in on some action on Elijah Mitchell in terms of his rushing attempts and his rushing yardage. And there's even a prop in the middle of the game that I took, Betz. I didn't tell you about this, but it was over 80 yards from Elijah Mitchell and the Niners win. And at one point he had 50 yards and it looked like they were going to win. So I just took it. So that one felt pretty good. This week, running back props are rough. Like a lot of the sites, so DraftKings and FanDuel specifically, are just not putting up running back. Like you can't find a Derrick Henry rushing prop right now because there's so much up in the air. You can't really find anything for Kansas City because that's up in the air. Leonard Fournette still feels like you don't really know what to do. And then I feel like they don't know what to do with Green Bay either, like Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. So you're not going to find any running back props, and I don't have any listed here. But give me your first one you like for quarterbacks.
Yeah, last week my biggest stance was the Josh Allen over on rushing yards, and that cleared in like his third carry. It was pretty awesome to see. I'm going back to a running prop for a quarterback. I think Josh Allen is viable, but they did raise the line this week. I'll go with Pat Mahomes. He is 22.5 rush yards on FanDuel, minus 130 juice. Looking at what he's done in the playoffs, he's gone over this line in 5 of his last 7 playoff games, looking at when he was not a rookie, so essentially when he started playing football. And we know he runs more in the playoffs. If there's going to be a ton of dropbacks for Mahomes, like we talked about with Allen, there's going to be opportunities to scramble. So I think Mahomes can get there, especially given that there is a line also on DraftKings for his longest rush to be 13.5 yards. And if they're projecting him to run one time for 14 yards, he's over halfway there already if he hits one of those. So I like the over on 22.5 rush yards for Pat Mahomes this week.
Sticking with Mahomes, there's a prop on DraftKings. It's over a half an INT. So do you believe that Patrick Mahomes will throw an interception, at least one? It's at plus 105 right now. Mahomes was bottom 5 in the league in INTs. Kind of a big deal this year, including, did you know he led the league in red zone INTs? He had 3 in one game at one point. So turnover and also against a pass defense that's ranked number 1 among remaining playoff teams. So I will take the plus money and obviously want to root for Patrick Mahomes. He's fun, but I will root for him to throw one interception.
Just one, not two, just one. I will go, keeping at the quarterback here, I like Ryan Tannehill over 238.5 passing yards. I got that on FanDuel. You can also get 237.5 on BetMGM. If you're a sicko and you want to line shop for 1 yard, you can do it. But I like the over for Tannehill here. We talked about it. You know, efficiency is the game, but this offense just has been insanely efficient with Derrick Henry in the lineup, as well as with A.J. Brown and Julio there together. If Cincy's going to throw the football more, which they have, it should push Ryan Tannehill to do the same. So I like the over there. 238.5 just feels way too low.
All right, let's go to wide receiver. I have right now on the dock Cole Beasley, your boy, at under 29.5 receiving yards on FanDuel. You can get that at minus 110. And Betz mentioned it earlier, but the dude ran 9 routes this past week. So if he's going to be in a committee, he's always been a low ADOT kind of guy, then yeah, I'll take my chances on under 30 yards for Cole Beasley.
I like that. I like that a lot. One that I like a lot too as well is Jamar Chase to go over 5.5 catches. It is a little pricey. It's minus 144 on FanDuel. If it gets way up there, then obviously it would be a different conversation, but I like it as of now. We talked about it. Jamar Chase, his role is so different than what it was early in the season. He's not just a deep ball guy that's going to get a handful of targets. He's seen 10 plus in 3 of the last 4 weeks. I think he can get 6 catches in this game against the Tennessee defense, getting targeted at the highest rate at opposing wide recievers.
All right, I'm going to rattle off a couple more in that same game because that's really where I found the best props in terms of that Tennessee and Cincinnati game. A.J. Brown to score is at plus 145 on FanDuel. I like his chances. We believe Tennessee passing offense. C.J. Uzomah under 3.5 receptions right now. It's minus 114 on FanDuel. Look, Tennessee's been a difficult matchup the entire year to tight ends. They've given up the 2nd lowest yards per target and the 4th lowest catch rate. So If he's not involved, then 3 or fewer receptions feels easy. And then Evan McPherson. It's been a while since I brought up a kicker, but over 1.5 field goals.
Only you, man.
Is plus 125 on DraftKings. Did I bet it? I did. I did bet on a kicker getting 2 field goals. How do you feel about that one, Betz? You want to go in on me with me?
Is there any analysis there? Or that's just your take. You say, I just bet it and I like it, so that's what I'm going to do.
Dude, 2 field goals in terms of their team applied total feels like doable. And he's been a reliable kicker. That was a good kicking game between the Raiders and the Bengals. Am I right?
Oh, so many field goals. That was fun to watch.
All right, let's go through a couple mailbag questions.
Mailbag.
Mailbag, you can send in your questions to me at Kyle_Borg or at the Fantasy PT for Bets. This first question comes in from the boy BS on Twitter. The question is, how many players in a full game stack is too many on a 4-game slate? It's a great question.
It is a good question. Context is needed here. If you're talking about teams that spread the target share out, then you could maybe go a little bit more. If it's teams that don't throw a lot, like for the Niners, for example, I wouldn't want to play like 3 Niners in my lineup. It just wouldn't get there as far as ceiling. So I think a general take here is if we're going to go full game stack, I would probably cap it at 4. Maybe you're going like double stack with your quarterback and then bring it back with 1 guy on the other team, or a single stack and then bring it back with 2 on the other side, that sort of situation. I think probably for me, that's the most I would go on this slate.
I would go 5 because I'm a sicko. But, I mean, let me throw this out there. Let's say you're doing
out of control.
Buffalo, Kansas City. Obviously has the highest total on the slate. We love both the quarterbacks, okay? So we're pretty much saying Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes is going to be the QB1, and we want 2 of his guys, okay? So let's say you went Mahomes. Let's say you went Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey, because honestly, pricing-wise, you can fit it in there. And then on the other side, you went Singletary and Diggs.
I mean, it could happen. and it's crazy to say those names because the pricing is so bad this week.
For sure. Are you telling me that I can basically do whatever I want in a GPP?
Yeah, you can. Whatever you want.
I cannot tell you how many times where people send a lineup, is this good in GPP? And every time I'll say, sure, it could work. You totally could work it out by playing 2 tight ends and, whatever else. Like Jerick McKinnon was the play this past week. If you would have played Jerick McKinnon and Byron Pringle, you would have done very well. Why was that not in your analysis this past week, Betz?
I was just lazy this week, man. That's the take home. I wasn't ready for those hot takes, so I guess I missed the boat.
All right, next one from Ken Hendricks. He says, when it's Yeti season, #Yeti season, and Joe B is on the opposite side, Joe Burrow, do you go all in on this one game and treat it almost like a showdown slate and basically ignore the other games? So he's talking about if you're playing just the 2-game slate, okay? You're just playing the Saturday. Do you go all in on that game and kind of go underweight on San Francisco and Green Bay?
If you're playing the 2-game slate, I think it's very viable. And because, we're not shooting for like on a 10-game main slate or 12-game main slate, you're searching more for high-end outcomes. On the small slates, you don't need every player to be the 95th percentile outcome to happen. You could get away with a 75% outcome and still be good and profitable. So yeah, if you think you have a strong take that Tennessee and Cincy just does go into an all-out back and forth affair, and Green Bay, beats San Francisco, let's say 20-10, and it kind of disappoints, it's viable. It absolutely can get there on those 2-game slates. And I think the general take-home is the smaller the slate, you want to embrace more variance and don't follow many rules as far as what you say for optimal lineup setting. So yeah, I think that's totally viable if you're just playing the 2-gamer.
Yep. Going all in is obviously going to give you a different lineup construction. So let's say you played, let's go with Burrow, Chase, and then you threw in Boyd, and you threw in the Bengals defense. I don't know, like that. You did that, and then you also threw in AJ Brown, and you're basically saying I need 6 players, and I bet no one else is going to have 6 players on their roster, and this is going to get there. So if you did that, you would basically say maybe I'm playing Aaron Jones on the Packers side and fading Devontae Adams, something like that. Like in a GPP, you are trying to look at your lineup and say, okay, is anybody else going to have these pieces And I'm saying the Bengals are winning. Like if you're doing that, you're saying the Bengals are going to win this game. Now, we mentioned earlier with Derrick Henry, like there's some volatility there. Like don't think you're going to get 20 carries automatically. So I would say for me to get different, if you think the field is going to be playing a lot of Derrick Henry, I probably wouldn't play him, play a ton of Bengals and play a ton of Titans pass catchers, which Betz and I are kind of big on. All right, 2 more questions. They're from the same person, your boy Krusty Season on the Discord channel. He said this: what do you think is the most important position to get right this week for GPPs?
This is a good question. I think my take here is probably the quarterback situation, right? Because on a slate with Mahomes and Allen, if you're going to go contrarian and play Burrow, or let's say Aaron Rodgers isn't contrarian necessarily, but let's say that you're saying he beats these guys, you better be right, because if you're not, you're probably getting buried. So I think quarterback situation is probably the most important to get right, and therefore the passing attack on those teams as well. So I'll say quarterbacks and pass catchers.
Yeah. Stafford's interesting because I think he can be the QB1. Like, let's say he puts up 303. You get the bonus on DraftKings. Like, I like Stafford a lot. But here's the thing with wide receiver, just looking at the pricing. A.J. Brown, who we love, could easily be the wide receiver 1. You and I were even talking about a prop earlier of A.J. Brown to lead the slate in receiving yards. He's the wide receiver 8 in pricing. Like, there are so many guys at the top, and you're not going to be able to fit in all of them. Kupp, Adams, Samuel, Chase, like those 4 guys right there, we all could tell ourselves a story. They're the wide receiver 1. But then you could easily see it from Tyreek. You could easily see it from Diggs, A.J. Brown, Evans. And then you start going down a little lower. It's like we love the values of OBJ. We like Tyler Boyd. I'm totally cool with Julio Jones. There's a ton of different different combinations in there. And then who's this week's Byron Pringle? I don't know. So getting those 3 spots, you have to get them right in your lineup for GPP. And then figuring out, do I want to flex them? Because I feel like running backs this week aren't going to have the ceiling where you're flexing that third running back. Like I feel like the builds that are going to be there will be 2 running backs. And then you're saying, who am I flexing wide receiver, or am I flexing a Kelsey because he's that last game? Or am I flexing Dawson Knox? So to me, it's figuring out what the high-end wide receivers, and I wish I had a strong stance. Like I really feel like I like all of them. Any last thoughts on just these high-end wide receivers?
No, I think you talked about it though. Like on this slate, you're looking for some variance to hit in a high ceiling way for these pass catchers. Like how many times do you think AJ Brown or Jamar Chase can beat Cam Akers or can beat Devin Singletary? Like those sort of situations. And I think most of the time the ceiling outcome is way higher for those guys. So I think I'm with you. It probably does feel like a 2 running back slate. And then, you chase the ceiling with those high upside guys at the wide receiver position.
All right. He has one follow-up question just for fun. Give me your Super Bowl predictions.
Ooh, nice. I like this. I like the Packers. It kind of feels like it's what everyone's saying, but they're just getting right at the right time. So I like Green Bay. And then if we think the Bills can upset the Chiefs, I think the winner of that game is going on. So give me the Bills taking on the Packers.
My bracket before the playoffs was Packers and Chiefs, and I had Packers, I think in December, before they were cool. I had the Packers. So for me, I still have the Packers winning it all. It's probably kind of a simple square take right now, but I will still stay with that, Packers and Chiefs. Although, I'm going to take some action on the Bills. Like I think they're just a solid bet even on the road this week to do some damage. If you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com. We're going to get divisional and go to the DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS Borg plus Betz. Keep taking our money. Betz wants his account to hit 0 by the end of the year. That's what he told his wife.
Oh man, if that happens, it's going to be a difficult conversation. So yes, if you're playing with us, maybe sprinkle in some Darrell Williams in your lineup this week for me, guys. Please, I could use the help.
See, Betz is all about the crowns. That's what he's explaining to his wife, Monica, is that I have a ton of crowns in my account and I get to use those. Those are going to be, they're like, they're a type of cryptocurrency. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. Those things are worth their weight in gold.
So you can play with us at ballersdfs.com and we would love to play with you guys. But Betz, why don't you sign us off?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone have an awesome weekend. These 4 games should be a ton of fun to watch, so enjoy the football. Best of luck in all your contests. Come play with us at FootballersDFS.com. And don't forget, we still got content up in the DFS Pass. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.